Imagine waking up one morning to find a stranger living in your home. They know the layout better than you do. They open doors you've always kept locked. They whisper in rooms you've never dared to enter. At first, you try to ignore them, but the truth gnaws at you. This intruder has always been here, living beneath your awareness, shaping your choices, your fears, even the people you fall in love with. What if that stranger is not someone else at all, but the hidden half of yourself? What if the very darkness you spend your life fleeing is the only part of you that truly knows the way out? Carl Jung called this hidden figure the shadow, the reservoir of everything you deny, repress, and refuse to acknowledge. It is not simply evil, nor is it merely the collection of mistakes you've made. It is the forgotten twin of your conscious self, carrying all the instincts, desires, and truths you buried to appear civilized, successful, or good. And yet, every decision you make, every secret you keep, every irrational fear you harbor is subtly guided by this silent presence. You think you're in control, but are you? Or is your shadow pulling the strings from behind the curtain of your mind? Consider this paradox. You want freedom, but the very strategies you use to attain it, self-control, discipline, positivity, virtue, may be the very things chaining you to illusions. You want to be happy, yet the harder you chase happiness, the more fragile and elusive it becomes. You want to be loved, but the persona you craft to gain love often hides the raw, flawed authenticity that might make love real. If this is true, then perhaps what you call living is merely a polished performance, and your authentic self lies gagged and bound in the basement of your psyche. If so, what kind of freedom is that? Imagine a life where you wake up each day and feel no need to hide any part of yourself. No shame when the darker impulses arise, no fear when rage boils up, no guilt when envy bites, no panic when doubt whispers. Instead of shoving these things into corners, you allow them space, not to dominate you, but to guide you toward truths you never dared face. Could it be that the darkness you fear is not your enemy, but your most misunderstood ally? Could it be that true freedom does not come from banishing the shadow, but by embracing it? Yet here lies the danger. The shadow, unacknowledged, does not remain passive. It leaks. It disguises itself as projections, when you despise in others the very traits you secretly harbor in yourself. It manifests as compulsions, addictions, or sudden bursts of anger you can't explain. It sabotages your relationships, making you push away the very people you crave closeness with. Every time you ignore it, its voice grows louder until it no longer whispers but screams. And still, society tells you, be good, be nice, be successful, keep smiling. But at what cost? If your shadow is the hidden wellspring of both your suffering and your liberation, then every time you deny it, you deny your chance at becoming whole. This is the great contradiction of human life. What we most desperately avoid may hold the very key to the freedom we seek. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And so the unsettling question arises, are you brave enough to look into the abyss of yourself, knowing it may not only stare back but show you who you truly are? What if the very traits you label as weakness are actually the missing half of your strength? What if your capacity for cruelty is bound to your capacity for justice, your envy tied to your yearning for growth, your fear inseparable from your longing for love? What if the light you seek cannot exist without the dark, unless you've tried to bury? Here is the great question then, the one that lingers long after the noise of everyday life fades. Is freedom found in suppressing your darkness, or in daring to integrate it? And if the latter is true, then every step you take away from your shadow is not safety, but exile from yourself. You are left standing at a precipice, peering into the abyss within. The ground feels unsteady, the air heavy, and your heart whispers both fear and fascination. Do you dare take the next step inward? Because until you do, you will never know whether the darkness you fear is a prison or the doorway to your liberation. The hidden problem, its psychological, philosophical roots. Why is it that the very part of ourselves most capable of unlocking freedom is the one we spend a lifetime denying? Why does society insist that light and virtue define the real self, while darkness must be chained and hidden? To answer this, we must step into the realm of psychology and philosophy, where thinkers like Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, Arthur Schopenhauer, and countless others wrestled with the contradictions of human nature. what you will see is unsettling. The hidden problem is not only personal, it is civilizational. You are not merely repressing your own darkness, you are living in a world that has institutionalized repression as a virtue. Carl Jung saw the psyche as a battlefield between the persona, the polished mask you present to the world, and the shadow, the raw, unfiltered totality of everything the persona excludes. The persona makes you socially acceptable. It tells you to smile when you are sad, to obey when you want to rebel, to forgive when you secretly thirst for vengeance. Without a persona, society would collapse into chaos, but with only the persona, the individual collapses inward into emptiness. Jung warned that those who live only in their mask eventually suffocate, for they cut themselves off from the very well of vitality that makes life meaningful. The hidden problem is not the shadow itself, it is our refusal to acknowledge that we even have one. But why this refusal? To answer, turn to Nietzsche, who saw in Western morality the triumph of what he called slave values. Societies, in order to function, reward docility, obedience, humility. The bold, instinctual, primal impulses are declared sinful. Passion is called lust. Will is called pride. Strength is called violence. The very forces that could liberate the individual are recoded as threats. Nietzsche argued that civilization achieves order by chaining the wild beast of man, but at the cost of vitality. You learn to distrust your own instincts, to see danger where there is possibility, to fear your own power as though it were evil. You inherit guilt for impulses you never chose. Thus, the shadow is born, not from evil itself, but from the labels society imposes on your natural impulses. Arthur Schopenhauer went even deeper into the metaphysical root of this conflict. For him, life itself is driven by the will, an irrational, blind force of desire and striving that pushes all beings to exist, to hunger, to seek. Civilization teaches you to suppress this will, to civilize it, to put it in chains. But the will cannot be destroyed. It only hides, mutating into neuroses, resentments, compulsions. You try to escape it by chasing pleasure, by masking yourself with distractions. But the will never rests. In every human being, Schopenhauer saw the tragedy of a creature torn between the instincts it cannot kill and the ideals it cannot live up to. The shadow, then, is the will denied, a force that grows more dangerous precisely because you refuse to face it. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, described another dimension of this hidden problem. He believed that human beings could endure almost any suffering if they found meaning in it. But without meaning, even comfort becomes unbearable. Why, then, do so many modern individuals report emptiness despite material abundance? Frankl suggested it is because they live without confronting the deepest parts of themselves. When you cut off the shadow, you cut off meaning. The result is what he called the existential vacuum, a hollow sense that life is shallow, a dull ache that no amount of entertainment, wealth, or achievement can heal. You chase pleasures, but you cannot escape the gnawing whisper, "Is this all there is?" Jung warned that this cultural obsession with light, positivity, and goodness comes at a devastating cost. What is denied does not vanish, it festers. Repressed anger erupts in violence. Repressed fear disguises itself as control. Repressed desire twists into obsession. The very act of denying the shadow makes it more powerful. Jung used the metaphor of alchemy to describe this. The transformation of lead into gold mirrored the transformation of the human soul. To make gold, you must confront the darkness of the raw material. To make the self whole, you must confront the shadow. If you refuse, you remain stuck in lead, heavy, dull, untransformed. The hidden problem, then, is that we live as though we are fragments. We curate personas, identities, social roles, but they are all partial, incomplete. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And isn't this what most people do? They live lives dictated by impulses they refuse to acknowledge, blaming destiny, luck, or circumstance. They choose partners not out of love, but from unhealed wounds. They sabotage careers not out of laziness, but out of hidden self-doubt. They pass their unacknowledged shadows onto their children, who then inherit the same wounds. Entire societies, even nations, repeat cycles of violence and oppression because collective shadows are denied. Look around today, and you will see symptoms everywhere. The rise of outrage culture, projecting moral purity while secretly harboring resentment. The addiction to social media, crafting perfect masks while feeling more fragmented than ever. The loneliness epidemic, not because humans are incapable of connection, but because authenticity feels dangerous. When the shadow is ignored, authenticity dies, and without authenticity, intimacy becomes impossible. Thus, you can live surrounded by people yet feel utterly unseen. The philosophers and psychologists converge on one truth: the shadow is not your enemy. The enemy is ignorance of the shadow. You are taught to believe that virtue lies in cutting off parts of yourself. In reality, virtue may lie in integrating them. Jung observed that some of the greatest atrocities in history were committed not by monsters who embraced evil, but by good men who denied their own darkness, projecting it outward. He warned that the most dangerous people are those convinced of their own righteousness, for they act out their shadow unconsciously, under the illusion of purity. So here you are, caught in a world that tells you to shine brighter, be happier, stay positive. Yet beneath the surface, your ignored impulses whisper louder each day. You sense the fracture inside. You sense that the mask no longer fits. You sense that your life is not entirely your own. The hidden problem is not that you have a shadow. The hidden problem is that you are terrified to meet it. And yet, without this confrontation, you will never truly be free. Which brings us to the next question. If you continue denying the shadow, what unseen consequences does it already have on your life? What price are you unknowingly paying for refusing to face what lies within? The unseen consequences. Imagine a puppeteer pulling strings above a stage. The actors move, speak, fight, and embrace, but none of them realize their actions are determined by hands they cannot see. This is what happens when you ignore your shadow. The consequences are not always dramatic explosions of violence or madness. More often they are subtle, invisible forces steering the very fabric of your existence. The tragedy is that by denying the shadow, you remain convinced you are free, when in truth, your choices, your loves, your fears, and even your failures are already scripted by the unconscious. Consider relationships. You tell yourself you are seeking love, companionship, intimacy. Yet without acknowledging your shadow, you inevitably project it onto others. That irritation you feel toward your partner for being controlling. Could it be the unacknowledged authoritarian within you? That jealousy you direct at a friend's success, could it be the ambition you never allowed yourself to admit? Jung warned that what we most despise in others is often what we deny in ourselves. Thus, your relationships become mirrors reflecting the disowned parts of your psyche. Instead of intimacy, you experience conflict. Because you are not relating to the person in front of you, you are battling your own shadow disguised as them. Now consider ambition. Perhaps you dream of achievement, of recognition, of finally proving your worth. But what if your shadow, filled with unacknowledged fear of failure, quietly sabotages you? You procrastinate, not because you are lazy, but because some hidden part of you believes you don't deserve success. You self-destruct in moments of opportunity, unconsciously confirming the narrative that you are unworthy. The shadow ensures you remain trapped in loops, repeating the same mistakes across years, even decades. You call it bad luck or fate, but in truth, it is your own unconscious dragging you back into the patterns you refuse to confront. On a societal scale, the unseen consequences are even more disturbing. Collective shadows erupt as wars, genocides, ideological purges. The hatred we direct toward the other is rarely about them. It is the projection of what we fear in ourselves. History is full of examples, societies that demonized sexuality, while their leaders secretly indulged in excess, nations that preached morality while committing atrocities in its name. Jung observed that Nazi Germany was the eruption of a collective shadow, resentments, fears, and desires that had been building in the unconscious of a people who denied them until they exploded with catastrophic force. When the shadow is ignored collectively, the result is not only personal suffering, but civilizational madness. Neuroscience today confirms what Jung intuited. Research into cognitive biases shows how much of human decision-making occurs below conscious awareness. The confirmation bias makes you cling to beliefs that protect your ego. The projection bias makes you assume others think and feel as you do. The negativity bias makes you remember slights and failures more than triumphs. Each of these biases is, in essence, the shadow at work, a reminder that what you think you choose rationally is already distorted by forces you refuse to see. Your conscious mind is not the driver of the car. It is the passenger inventing explanations for turns it never made. Even your emotions, the most intimate sense of me, are infiltrated by the unseen shadow. Rage that explodes at the wrong time, sorrow that lingers long after its cause is gone, envy that bites into your joy. Each of these is a signal from the unconscious. But because you dismiss them, they manifest as suffering rather than guidance. How many people are medicated, numbed, distracted, not because their brains are broken, but because their shadow is screaming for attention? To live in denial is to live in constant low-grade war with yourself. Perhaps the most insidious consequence of ignoring the shadow is the erosion of authenticity. You live behind a mask, playing roles you never chose: the good employee, the loyal spouse, the kind friend. But beneath the surface, resentment builds. You smile when you want to scream. You nod when you want to protest. You stay silent when truth burns inside you. Over time, you forget who you are without the mask. Life becomes mechanical, a series of performances, until one day you wake up and realize you no longer recognize the person in the mirror. This is not living. It is existing in exile from yourself. And so the shadow extracts its toll. Some pay in addictions, endlessly seeking to fill the void with substances, distractions, or endless scrolling. Others pay in broken relationships, sabotaging intimacy because vulnerability threatens to expose their hidden self. Some pay in illness, as chronic stress, anxiety, and depression manifest when the psyche is divided against itself. And still others pay in numbness, perhaps the most tragic of all, the inability to feel deeply, to weep, to rage, to love with abandon. To deny the shadow is to trade intensity for safety, and the price is a life half-lived. But perhaps the most dangerous consequence is this: the shadow does not disappear simply because you refuse to see it. Instead, it grows in secret. When you finally encounter it, it may no longer be a whisper, but a monster. The man who insists he is incapable of cruelty may one day erupt in violence. The woman who swears she has no ambition may one day find herself consumed by envy. The nation that insists on its moral superiority may one day unleash its darkest instincts on the world. Denial does not heal, it incubates. So here you are, carrying within you a silent power that shapes your life in ways you scarcely realize. Every conflict, every failure, every haunting emptiness may not be random misfortune but the shadow's influence. To live without acknowledging it is to live like a puppet, convinced of its own freedom, dancing to strings you cannot see. Which raises the question, if ignoring the shadow leads only to hidden chains, what would it mean to rebel against this fate? What would it take to break free from the unconscious strings and reclaim authorship of your life? And more importantly, do you dare face the darkness directly, knowing that freedom lies on the other side? The rebellion. How to break free. Rebellion does not always begin with fire, armies, or revolution. Sometimes it begins with a single act of courage so quiet that the world does not even notice. The greatest rebellion you can ever stage is not against governments or systems, but against the unconscious chains you carry inside. To confront your shadow is to commit treason against the persona you've spent a lifetime protecting. It is to stop being a puppet and seize the strings for yourself. But make no mistake, this rebellion is not for the faint of heart. It requires you to step into the labyrinth of your own psyche, knowing you will encounter demons you once swore you did not have. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming a whole and authentic self, begins when you turn toward your shadow, not away from it. But what does this look like in practice? The first step is radical honesty. You must begin asking yourself questions you've avoided for years. What do you envy most in others, and why? What qualities in people make you instantly dislike them? What secret fantasies have you buried beneath shame? The answers to these questions are not trivial. They are maps pointing you to the shadow. Each resentment, each judgment, each unacknowledged desire is a doorway into the parts of yourself you have refused to claim. This rebellion requires you to admit something almost unbearable, that you are not who you pretend to be. The good self, the moral self, the kind self, these are masks. The authentic self is larger, darker, more complex. Nietzsche warned that whoever fights monsters must beware of becoming one, yet he also insisted that one who never dares to face monsters will remain forever small. To break free, you must recognize that the monster is already within, and only by acknowledging it can you prevent it from consuming you. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to face fear and still take a step forward. Think of history's great rebels, not just warriors or politicians, but inner rebels. Socrates defied the Athenian order by daring to question what everyone accepted as truth. He drank poison rather than betray his inner calling. Buddha turned away from the palace of comfort to confront suffering head-on, sitting beneath the Bodhi tree until enlightenment emerged. Viktor Frankl, in The Horror of Auschwitz, refused to let despair dictate his spirit, finding meaning even in suffering. What united them was not denial of the shadow, but a confrontation with the deepest realities of existence. They dared to look where others turned away. But rebellion also demands integration. The shadow cannot simply be released unchecked, or it will overwhelm you. To rebel is not to indulge every dark impulse, but to meet it with awareness. Imagine anger. Denied, it turns to bitterness. Indulged recklessly, it destroys. But integrated, it becomes righteous passion, the fuel to fight injustice. Imagine envy. Denied, it poisons relationships. Indulged, it corrodes. But integrated, it becomes inspiration, a recognition of what you truly desire. Integration means no longer pretending to be pure, but learning to weave light and dark into a single tapestry. The tools of rebellion are not external weapons, but internal practices. One is shadow work, a term inspired by Jung, which involves actively seeking out the hidden aspects of yourself. This can take the form of journaling, where you allow your darkest thoughts to spill onto paper without censorship. Or active imagination, Jung's technique of dialoguing with figures from your unconscious as though they were real. Or even therapy, where another person holds the mirror you cannot bear to hold alone. Each method is a weapon of liberation, but only if you wield it with honesty. Another tool is paradoxical acceptance. Instead of fighting to fix your flaws, you learn to sit with them, to accept that being human is to be contradictory. You are capable of kindness and cruelty, love and indifference, wisdom and foolishness. To rebel is to abandon the false dream of perfection and embrace wholeness instead. Wholeness is not the absence of darkness, but its integration. Jung said, "I would rather be whole than good." This is the essence of the rebellion, to value authenticity over conformity, truth over image, wholeness over false goodness. This path is frightening because it strips away illusions. You will see that many of your virtues are disguises for fear. You may realize your kindness was often a strategy for control, your humility a mask for insecurity, your selflessness a way to avoid confronting your own desires. Such revelations cut deep, but they are also liberating. For when you see clearly, you are no longer ruled by lies. The rebellion frees you not by making you someone new, but by making you someone true. The consequence of such a rebellion is radical freedom. When you no longer hide from your shadow, other people's judgments lose their grip. You no longer need to maintain the exhausting performance of the persona. You begin to act from the core of your being, not from what society expects. This does not mean chaos. Paradoxically, it creates order. For when you integrate the shadow, you no longer live at war with yourself. Energy once wasted on repression is now available for creation, love, and purpose. But let us not romanticize the struggle. To face the shadow is to walk through fire. It may mean confronting memories you buried, desires you fear, guilt that sears. It may shatter relationships built on illusion. It may demand that you shed an identity you thought was permanent. Rebellion always costs something. But what is the alternative? To remain a puppet forever, mistaking chains for safety. To live half a life, dimmed and muted, while the shadow drags you silently into despair. The rebellion is terrifying, but it is also the only path to freedom. And once you begin, you realize something astonishing. The shadow is not only darkness, hidden within it is also light, vitality, creativity, passion. The energy you feared was destructive becomes the very power that animates your existence. Freedom is not the absence of the shadow, it is the union with it. And so, the question now shifts. If rebellion means liberation through integration, then what lies on the other side of this journey? What is the ultimate truth revealed when you dare to face the abyss and discover that the abyss was part of you all along? The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon. For years, you believed the canyon was a prison, a bottomless void to be avoided at all costs. You built walls around it, planted gardens to distract yourself, and told stories about how good people never even glanced toward the abyss. But now, after the rebellion of facing your shadow, you dare to look down. And to your astonishment, you realize that the canyon was never a void at all. It was a doorway. What you feared as annihilation was, in truth, the threshold of wholeness. This is the final realization. Your darkness was never your enemy. It was the key to your freedom, the missing half of your soul. Carl Jung taught that true individuation, the process of becoming fully human, occurs only when the conscious and unconscious are united. It is not enough to be good, nor to repress the shadow. Wholeness comes from integration, and integration reveals something profound. You are not merely fragments, not a mask hiding a beast. You are a totality, a synthesis of light and dark, weakness and strength, cruelty and compassion. This is the paradox that rattles the foundations of moral and psychological certainty. You are Beaker, of angel and monster, saint and sinner, creator and destroyer. To be free is to accept this totality and to live from it consciously. The final truth, then, is that the shadow is not just your darkness, it is also your hidden light. Buried in your shame is courage. Hidden in your rage is vitality. Concealed in your envy is the map of your true desires. The qualities you feared would destroy you are the very ones that, when integrated, allow you to become whole. What you labeled as flaws were, in truth, potentials in disguise. Jung wrote, "The gold is in the dark." The very places you avoided are where your transformation waits. Think of the myths humanity has told for millennia. The hero must descend into the underworld before returning with wisdom. Orpheus must travel into Hades. Dante must wander through hell. Christ descends before rising again. These stories are not about geography, they are about psychology. They are maps of the shadow. To find freedom, you must go down, not up. You must embrace the darkness, not flee it. Only then do you return with the treasure that makes life meaningful. The ultimate truth is that your shadow was never a dungeon. It was your unmined gold. And yet, this realization also carries responsibility. To embrace your shadow is not to excuse cruelty, to indulge recklessness, or to glorify destruction. It is to wield these forces consciously. A sword in the hands of a blind man is danger. In the hands of one who sees, it is protection. The shadow gives you power, but power must be carried with awareness. Jung warned that the person who integrates their shadow is dangerous, not because they harm recklessly, but because they cannot be manipulated. They no longer fear their own darkness, and so they are free from the chains of others' judgments. They cannot be blackmailed by shame nor seduced by false virtue. They stand whole, unbroken, auth. Entis. This is the freedom you've been searching for, not the fragile freedom of constant positivity, nor the shallow freedom of external success. It is the deep freedom of self-ownership. When you are whole, life ceases to feel like a performance. You no longer act to please, to prove, to hide. You act from your essence. Paradoxically, this makes you more compassionate, not less. For when you accept your own darkness, you no longer project it onto others. You see people as they are, flawed and complex, just like you. And in that recognition, true connection becomes possible. Love deepens. Forgiveness softens. Creativity flourishes. The ultimate realization is that what you feared as fragmentation was always unity in disguise. Your shadow is not a monster to be slain. It is the twin you left behind, waiting for your return. To embrace it is to finally come home to yourself. And in doing so, you discover that freedom was never about escaping suffering, but about transforming it into meaning. Viktor Frankl saw this clearly in the death camps. Suffering without meaning destroys, but suffering with meaning ennobles. When you integrate your shadow, suffering itself becomes a teacher, not a tormentor. Look again at the paradox that began this journey. You wanted to be happy, and the harder you chased happiness, the more it eluded you. The truth is, happiness was never the goal. Wholeness was. And wholeness is not the absence of sorrow, but the ability to hold both sorrow and joy in the same breath. You wanted to be free of fear, but freedom comes not from eradicating fear, but from walking beside it, knowing it will no longer control you. You wanted to be loved, but true love comes not when you present a perfect mask, but when you reveal your whole self, light and dark, and find that another human soul recognizes you anyway. This is the truth that shatters illusions and sets you free. The darkness you fled was your own power in exile. By reclaiming it, you reclaim yourself. And by reclaiming yourself, you reclaim life. You are no longer a puppet pulled by unseen strings, no longer a mask hiding from mirrors. You are both the light and the dark, the question and the answer, the abyss and the bridge across it. To know this is to finally understand what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So now, as the echoes of this journey settle, you stand before a choice. You can return to the comfort of denial, to the half-life of masks and repression. Or you can step fully into the fire of wholeness, daring to live as one who has embraced both angel and demon, light and shadow. The decision is yours alone. But remember, the key to your freedom has always been in your hand. It was simply hidden in the darkness you feared. And perhaps the final question is not whether you can face your shadow, but whether you can bear the weight of living free once you do. For once you see the truth, you can never unsee it. Once you claim your wholeness, you can never again be content with half a life. The darkness was never against you, it was always waiting for you.